The alarm pierced through the artificial dawn of Kepler Station like a blade through silence. Red warning lights bathed the nursery corridors in crimson waves, casting dancing shadows on the reinforced walls. Dr. Sarah Chun's hands moved with practiced precision as she sealed the final emergency protocol on her tablet. But her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. "All human staff to emergency stations," the automated voice announced with mechanical calm. "Galactic Predator Council forces have breached the outer perimeter." Sarah looked down at the sleeping form in the bio-cradle before her. Cub was no bigger than a human infant, its scaled hide shifting from deep purple to soft amber in its dreams. Teeny claws flexed against the thermal blanket and a low rumbling purr vibrated from its chest. In 6 months, this little one would grow to the size of a small truck. In 2 years, it would be capable of tearing through steel with those same claws. But right now, it was just a baby. "Sarah?" Marcus Rivera burst through the nursery doors, his maintenance uniform torn and stained with something that looked suspiciously like hydraulic fluid. The council ships aren't responding to any diplomatic channels. They're demanding immediate surrender of all cubs. Sarah's grip tightened on the bio-cradle's edge. Around the vast nursery, hundreds of similar cradles hummed quietly, each containing the offspring of the galaxy's most feared predator species, the 3 dragon cats that would one day breathe plasma. Krellian warhounds, whose adult forms could survive in the vacuum of space. Thixian shadow stalkers that could phase through solid matter. All of them, helpless infants now. "Long until they reach the nursery level?" Sarah asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Marcus checked his wrist display. 20 minutes.
Maybe.
Less. Through the massive viewport that dominated the nursery's far wall, Sarah could see the approaching ships. The Galactic Predator Council's warfleet moved like a storm of metal and fury across the starfield. Each vessel was a masterwork of intimidation, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. They had come for their young, but something was wrong with this picture. Sarah had worked on Kepler Station for 5 years. Ever since the interspecies childcare accords had been signed, she had seen Vorthok's parents weep tears of liquid mercury when they handed over their cubs. She had watched Zethri queens keen with grief as they entrusted their eggs to human care. The separation was painful, but it was necessary. Adult predator species couldn't help themselves around their own young. Instincts older than civilization drove them to consume their offspring before they could become competition. Humans were the only species that could resist that urge, the only species that could raise predator cubs safely. So why were the Predator Council ships not maintaining the agreed-upon safety distance? Why were they coming closer?
"Sarah, we need to evacuate,"
Marcus said, but his eyes were also fixed on the approaching fleet. "The evacuation pods are ready. We can save ourselves." "And leave the cubs?" Marcus's face twisted with anguish. He had helped raise many of these younglings, too. "What choice do we have? We're nursery workers, not soldiers." Sarah walked to the viewport, placing her palm against the cool metal. In the reflection, she could see the rows of bio-cradles behind her, each one containing a life that depended entirely on human protection. The irony wasn't lost on her. The galaxy's most feared predators trusted their most precious possessions to what they considered the weakest species in known space. Humans. Soft. Fragile, emotional creatures who couldn't see in the dark, couldn't survive in vacuum, couldn't tear through armor with their bare hands, but humans could do something that no predator species could manage. They could love something without wanting to destroy it. Marcus, Sarah said quietly, "Have you ever wondered why the Accords specify that only humans can staff these nurseries? Because we're the only ones who won't eat the cubs. That's what everyone thinks." Sarah turned back to face him, and Marcus was struck by the fierce determination in her eyes. "But I think there's more to it. I think there's something the Predator Council knows about humans that we don't know about ourselves." The station shuddered as the first Council ships made contact with the docking bays. Somewhere in the distance, Sarah could hear the distinctive sound of Krellian war boots on metal decking, a rhythmic pounding that seemed to shake the very bones of the station. "They're inside," Marcus whispered. Sarah moved to the central control console and began typing rapid commands. I'm sealing the nursery. Emergency protocols. Sarah, that won't hold them. A Vorthok adult could tear through those blast doors like paper. Then we'd better hope I'm right about humans. The blast doors slammed shut with a sound like thunder. The nursery was now completely isolated from the rest of the station, but Sarah knew it was only a temporary measure. Through the internal system, she could hear the sound of the Predator Council forces moving through the station's corridors. They weren't being subtle about their approach, and that, Sarah realized, was the first strange thing. Predator species were hunters by nature. When they wanted something, they typically approached with stealth and precision. The fact that they were making so much noise suggested either arrogance or fear. But what could the galaxy's most powerful predators possibly be afraid of? The answer came sooner than Sarah expected. Chapter 2. The confrontation. The blast doors exploded inward. With a shower of sparks and twisted metal, through the smoking breach came the most terrifying sight in the known. Galaxy, a full Predator Council assault squad. General Tharkanoon of the Vorthok led the charge, his massive form barely fitting through the damaged doorway. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled hide was the color of deep space, broken by scars from 1,000 battles. His eyes, 6 of them, arranged in 2 rows, glowed like hot coals in the dim emergency lighting. Behind him came Azathri, War Maiden, her plasma breath apparatus gleaming on her reptilian muzzle, and a pack of Krellian shock troopers whose armor seemed to absorb light itself, but it was the Ixian that made Sarah's blood run cold. The Shadow Stalker appeared as little more than a vague outline, phasing in and out of visible reality like a nightmare that couldn't decide whether to be real or not. Human, General Tharkanoon's voice was like grinding stone translated through the universal communicator at his throat. Step away from our young. Sarah stood her ground in front of the bio-cradles, her arms spread wide in a gesture that was both protective and defiant. Behind her, some of the cubs had awakened at the noise, their small cries and whimpers filling the air. The sound seemed to cause visible pain to the adult predators. Several of them flinched and stepped back. By the terms of the interspecies childcare accords, these cubs are under human protection until they reach maturity, Sarah said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. You're violating about 12 different galactic treaties right now. The Zathri War Maiden laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Treaties written by prey species to protect themselves from us. We have decided to reclaim what is ours. Marcus stepped up beside Sarah, his maintenance tools gripped like weapons in his shaking hands. You can't raise them safely yourselves. That's why the Accords exist in the first place. Accords exist, General Tharkanoon growled, because our ancestors were weak. Because they let themselves be convinced that predators could not care for their own offspring without destroying them. Sarah's mind raced. Something in the general's tone suggested this wasn't just about reclaiming the cubs. It was something else driving this confrontation. Why now? She asked. These accords have been in place for 50 years. What's changed? The Vexian Shadow Stalker phased more solidly into reality, its form coalescing into something vaguely humanoid, but wrong in every detail. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Tell her, General, tell the human why we are really here. General Tharkanoon's 6 eyes focused on Sarah with uncomfortable intensity. For a moment she thought she saw something unexpected. They're not just predatory hunger, but genuine fear. We know what you did to the hegemony fleet. Sarah blinked in confusion. I'm sorry, what? Don't play ignorant. Human. The synthetic hegemony sent a war fleet to your homeworld 3 months ago. 12,000 vessels. Enough firepower to glass a planet. Marcus frowned. I heard about that on the news feeds. Earth's defense fleet turned them back. Zathri War Maiden hissed with what might have been laughter. Turn them back? Human. Your species has 43 ships in your entire defense fleet. Ancient. Vessels that couldn't scratch the paint on a hegemony destroyer. So what really happened? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to know the answer. General Tharkanoon leaned forward. his massive frame casting Sarah and Marcus in shadow. The hegemony fleet disappeared. All 12,000 ships gone without a trace. No debris, no distress calls, no witnesses. And the only evidence left behind, the Vexian whispered, were human ships in the area where the fleet was last detected. Sarah felt the blood drain from her FA key. That's impossible. Humans don't have that kind of technology. We can barely manage interstellar travel. That's what we all thought, General Tharkanoon said, till the hegemony sent probes to investigate. Do you know what they found? Sarah shook her head mutely. Nothing. Empty space. But the quantum resonance signatures suggested the ships weren't destroyed. They were ... relocated, moved somewhere else entirely, somewhere outside normal space-time. The nursery fell silent, except for the soft sounds of the sleeping cubs. Mind struggled to process what she was hearing. The implications were staggering. You think humans did that? Marcus asked incredulously. That's insane, is it? The Zathri War Maiden stepped closer, her plasma breath apparatus glowing with contained heat. Tell me, human, how many of your kind work in sensitive positions throughout the galaxy? How many human civilians staff our most important facilities? Felt a chill run down her spine. You think we're spies? We think, General Tharkanoon said slowly, that your species has been hiding its true capabilities, playing weak and harmless while positioning yourselves at the heart of every major galactic power structure, including the Vexian added. Being the only species trusted to raise our children, the accusation hung in the air like a poisoned cloud. Sarah looked around the nursery at the hundreds of sleeping cubs, each one representing the future of their respective species. If the Predator Council truly believed that humans were some kind of hidden threat, you think we're going to hurt them? She said quietly. We think, General Tharkanoon replied, that we've been fools to trust any species with our most precious possessions. The galaxy believes humans are weak because humans want the galaxy to believe humans are weak. Sarah felt anger building in her chest. Look around you. Do these cubs look hurt? Do they look neglected or abused? We've been caring for predator young for 50 years, and not a single cub has been harmed under human supervision. Yet the Zathri War Maiden hissed. So what's your plan? Marcus demanded. Take them back to your homeworlds where your own instincts will drive you to kill them. The silence that followed was telling. Sarah realized that the Predator Council didn't have a plan. They were acting out of fear, not logic. But there was still something they weren't telling her. What else? Sarah asked. The hegemony fleet disappearing isn't enough to justify breaking the accords. What else has you spooked? General Tharkanoon exchanged glances with his companions. The Vexian phased partially out of reality, as if trying to hide even while standing in plain sight. Tell her about the Devourers, the Shadow Stalker whispered. Sarah's blood went cold. The Devourers were legend and ancient entities from the void between galaxies that consumed entire star systems. Hadn't been seen in over 1,000 years. 3 weeks ago, General Tharkanoon said reluctantly. Our deep space monitoring stations detected Devourer signatures at the edge of the galaxy. A scouting force. They're coming back. And Sarah prompted, though she was beginning to understand. The first system they consumed was the one where the human colony ship Harmony was conducting routine exploration missions. Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm. That's not possible. The Harmony was lost with all hands. Was it? The Zathri War Maiden's eyes glowed with suspicion. Or did your people make contact with the Devourers? Did you make some kind of deal? The accusation was so absurd that Sarah almost laughed. Almost. But the deadly serious expressions on the Predator's faces stopped her. You think humans are working with entities that eat star systems? We think. General Tharkanoon said that humans are far more dangerous than they appear. We will not leave our cubs in the care of a species that might be in league with the greatest threat the galaxy has ever known. Before Sarah could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. New ones, different from the breach alerts. These were coming from the Deep Space Monitoring Array, Marcus said, staring at his wrist display. Oh no, what? Sarah? Demanded. Marcus looked up, his face pale as death. Ships incoming. Massive energy signatures. He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. The computer identifies them as devourer vessels. General Tharkanoon roared something in his native language that the translator couldn't parse. The other predators immediately took defensive positions around the nursery, and that's when Sarah realized something that changed everything. The predator council hadn't come to take their cubs away. They had come to protect them. #. Chapter 3. The truth revealed, the devourer. Ships appeared on the station's external monitors like wounds in reality itself. They weren't built, they were grown, twisted amalgamations of dark matter and corrupted space that hurt to look at directly. 3 of them, each the size of a small moon, drifting toward Kepler Station with the inexorable patience of death itself. Estimated time to contact, the station's computer announced with inappropriate calm, 17 minutes. General Tharkanoon was coordinating with his forces through rapid growls and clicks that the universal translator couldn't keep up with. The Z3 War Maiden had moved to the viewport, her plasma breath apparatus charging with deadly light. The Dexian Shadow Stalker was phasing in and out of reality so rapidly it was making Sarah dizzy to watch. But it was Marcus who asked the question that cut through the chaos. If you came here to protect the cubs from the devourers, why did you attack the station? General Tharkanoon's 6 eyes focused on him with laser intensity. Because we needed to test you. Test us, Sarah demanded. The Accords specify that human caregivers will protect predator young with their lives if necessary. Day 3, War Maiden said, without taking her eyes off the approaching devourer fleet. But words on a treaty are meaningless. We needed to know if you would actually fight for our children when the time came. So you staged an attack, Sarah said, pieces clicking into place. You terrified us, threatened us, all to see if we'd run or stand our ground. And you stood your ground, the Dexian whispered, phasing more solidly into reality. Even when facing creatures that could tear you apart with their bare claws. Sarah felt a surge of anger. You could have just asked, could we? General Tharkanoon turned to face her fully. Human. Your species has been hiding its true nature for decades. The disappearing hegemony fleet. The lost colony ship found in devourer space. The way your people always seem to be in the right place at the right time to prevent galactic disasters. What are you talking about? Marcus was frantically working at his maintenance tablet. Sarah, I'm picking up something weird on the station's quantum sensors. The devourer ships, they're not attacking. Everyone in the nursery turned to look at the monitors. Marcus was right. Devourer vessels had stopped their approach and were holding position just outside the station's defense perimeter. Aren't they attacking? Z3 War Maiden hissed. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the biocradles behind Sarah began chiming softly. The Exian cub was awakening. As the small shadow stalker opened its eyes, Sarah noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. The cub's eyes were glowing with the same dark energy signature as the devourer ships. General Sarah said slowly, how much do you actually know about devourer biology?
They are entities of pure hunger, General Tharkanoon replied.
They consume matter and energy indiscriminately. They cannot be reasoned with or bargained with. Sarah moved to the Dexian cub's biocradle and gently lifted the small creature. It cooed softly and nuzzled against her shoulder, its form solidifying. At her touch, Marcus, can you access the xenobiology database? Already on it, Marcus said, his fingers flying over his tablet, looking up. Oh my. What? According to the genetic analysis we did when this cub arrived, Dexian DNA contains quantum markers that are, well, they're identical to the energy signatures we're reading from the devourer ships. The silence that followed was deafening. That's impossible, the Dexian Shadow Stalker said, but its voice carried a note of uncertainty. Sarah looked at the small cub in her arms, then at the massive devourer ships on the monitors. A terrible understanding was beginning to dawn. General, how old are the oldest Dexian individuals? Our eldest are perhaps 2,000 of your years old. Why? And when did the devourers last attack the galaxy? General Tharkanoon's eyes widened. 1,000 years ago, Slara walked to the central console and began pulling up files. Marcus, help me cross-reference. the genetic databases for all the predator species with the quantum signatures from known devourer encounters. As the data streamed across the screens, a pattern emerged that made everyone in the nursery stare in shock. Every predator species showed genetic markers that matched different aspects of devourer biology. Vorthok DNA contained the same quantum. Resilience patterns, Sci-Fi genetics, showed identical energy manipulation capabilities. Corellian biology exhibited the same space survival adaptations. "You're not separate species," Sarah whispered. "You're fragments, pieces of what the devourers used to be." The Vexian Shadowstalker phased completely solid for the first time since entering the nursery. "That is ... It explains everything," Marcus said, his voice filled with awe. "Why predator species have such strong instincts to consume their own young. Why you can't resist the urge to see them as competition rather than children." "'Cause," Sarah continued, looking at each of the predators in turn, "on some deep genetic level, you recognize them as what you used to be. As the power you lost when your ancestors split apart." General Tharkanun took a step backward, his massive frame suddenly seeming smaller. "You're saying we were once devourers?" "I'm saying the devourers were once you. All of you. One species that split itself apart rather than continue as entities of pure consumption." The monitors chimed with an incoming transmission. The signal was coming from the lead devourer vessel, but when the communication screen activated, the image that appeared wasn't the cosmic horror everyone expected. It was human. Captain Alina Vasquez of the Earthship Harmony appeared on screen, her uniform torn but her expression determined. Behind her, Sarah could see what looked like the bridge of a human vessel, but the technology was unlike anything she'd ever seen before. "Kepler Station, this is Captain Vasquez. Please respond." Sarah stepped forward, still holding the Vexian. "Cub Captain, we read you. How are you? ... Where are you?" "It's a long story," Captain Vasquez replied. "But the short version is that we've been working with the entities you call devourers to prevent a galactic catastrophe." General Tharkanun pushed forward. "Human, explain yourself. Those are devourer vessels with you." Captain Vasquez's expression grew grim. "They're not devourer vessels anymore, General. They're Orcs. The entities inside. They're dying. Dying." The Sci-Fi War Maiden demanded. "The split that created your species 1,000 years ago, it saved the galaxy from consumption, but it doomed the remaining devourers to a slow extinction. They've been using the last of their energy to prevent something much worse from breaking through from the void between galaxies." On the screen behind Captain Vasquez, another figure appeared. Tall, ethereal, and radiating the same dark energy as the ships around the station. Somehow different. Gentler. When it spoke, its voice was like the whisper of distant stars. "We are the remnants of what your people became, and we are dying to hold back what we once were." Sarah felt pieces of a cosmic puzzle clicking into place. "The colony ship, the missing hegemony fleet, you've been working together to prepare for something. The true devourers," Captain Vasquez confirmed. "Entities that created the first devourers as scouts. They're coming, and when they arrive, they won't just consume star systems. They'll consume reality itself," the remnant devourer added. "Unless we can reunite what was split apart, unless the fragments can become whole again." The cub in her arms, then at the predator species around her. "That's why you need the cubs. They're the key to reunification. And that's why humans were chosen as their guardians," General Tharkanun said, understanding finally dawning in his 6 eyes. "Because humans are the only species that can facilitate the process without being corrupted by the power." "But how?" Marcus asked. "How can humans possibly?" Because Sarah said, everything suddenly becoming clear. "Humans aren't immune to predator instincts. We don't have them at all. We're something else entirely." The monitors around the nursery lit up with new readings. The station's deep space sensors were detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the galaxy. Not ships this time, something far larger and more terrible. "They're coming," Captain Vasquez announced. "The true devourers have found us. We have maybe 6 hours before they breach the galactic barrier." Sarah looked around the nursery at hundreds. of predator cubs, each one carrying the genetic potential to become part of something greater than themselves. Then she looked at the adult predators, warriors who had spent their lives fearing their own nature. What do you need us to do? The question that would determine the fate of the galaxy hung in the air like a prayer. And for the first time since the crisis began, General Tharkanoon smiled, terrifying expression on a Vorthok face, but somehow reassuring. Help us remember what we used to be. Help us become what we need to be. The real battle was about to begin. Chapter 4. The Unity Protocol. Nursery had been transformed into something resembling a war room crossed with a laboratory. Holographic displays showed star charts, genetic sequences, and energy readings. That painted a picture of impending cosmic catastrophe. The true devourers were 6 massive entities drifting through the void between galaxies, one the size of a solar system, each one radiating hunger that could be felt across dimensional barriers. Sarah stood at the center of it all, holding the Avexian cub while coordinating between species that had never worked together in recorded history. Around her, predator adults and their young were being arranged in specific patterns based on genetic compatibility readings that Marcus was calculating on the fly. The quantum resonance needs to be perfect, Captain Vasquez explained through the comlink. Her ship was now docked with one of the reformed Devourer vessels, creating a hybrid command center that existed partially outside normal space. If we're off by even a fraction, the reunification process could tear apart local space-time instead of strengthening it. General Tharkanoon knelt beside a biocradle containing a Vorthok cub, his massive claws trembling as he reached toward his offspring. For 1,000 years we have fought the urge to consume our young. Now you ask us to embrace that connection? Not consume, Sarah corrected gently. Integrate. The genetic patterns show that the original Devourer consciousness wasn't about destruction, it was about unity. Perfect synthesis of all biological potential. The Zathri War Maiden hissed with frustration. And if we're wrong, if touching our cubs triggers the old instincts? Sarah looked at the small Vexian in her arms. The cub had been growing stronger throughout the crisis, its shadow-phasing abilities becoming more controlled and purposeful. Then humans will be here to help you remember why you chose to split apart in the first place. Through the viewport, the approaching true devourers were now visible as distortions in space, self-reality bending around their massive forms like water around stones. The station's instruments calculated impact in 4 hours and 17 minutes. Marcus looked up from his calculations, sweat beading on his forehead. I've got the pattern mapped out. We need the cubs arranged in a specific configuration based on their genetic markers. But Sarah, ... Double quotes, he paused, his expression troubled. What? The energy requirements for this are off the charts. Even with the reformed devourers helping, we're going to need something to anchor the process, something to keep the unified consciousness from dispersing back into chaos. Captain Vasquez's voice crackled through the cum. We've been analyzing that problem. The only anchor point that could work is a consciousness that's completely outside the devourer genetic matrix, something that can maintain objective perspective during the reunification. A human consciousness. Not just any human, the remnant devourer added, its voice like distant starlight. The process requires someone who has formed emotional bonds with multiple predator cubs. Someone who can maintain the unity between species fragments while resisting the pull of cosmic hunger. Everyone in the nursery turned to look at Sarah. She had been the primary caregiver for cubs from every predator species on the station. She had bottle-fed Vorthok hatchlings, played with Zathri young, comforted crying Krellian pups in the middle of their sleep cycles. What exactly are you asking me to do? General Tharkanoon's 6 eyes met hers with something that might have been respect. Link your consciousness to the reunification process. Become the bridge between what we were and what we must become, and the risks. Captain Vasquez's voice was quiet. The human consciousness might not survive intact. You could become lost in the unified entity. Or worse, you could be consumed by the cosmic scale awareness we're trying to create. Sarah looked around the nursery at the hundreds of cubs depending on her decision. Then she looked at the adult, predators who had overcome their most basic instincts to work with humans in this desperate moment. How do we start? The next 3 hours were a blur of preparation that pushed every system on the station to its limits. The bio-cradles were arranged in a complex mandala pattern with cubs from each species positioned according to their genetic resonance frequencies. Adult predators took positions around the perimeter, their natural energy signatures creating a containment field. The reformed devourer vessels had merged with Kepler Station itself, their exotic matter holes integrating with the station's structure to create a hybrid platform that existed partially in normal space and partially in the quantum foam between dimensions. Sarah stood at the center of the pattern, surrounded by the soft sounds of predator cubs who had no idea they were about to become part of something cosmic in scope. The Vexian youngling remained in her arms, its shadow phasing abilities now synchronized with her heartbeat. Initiating quantum field resonance, Marcus announced from the control console. All stations report ready. Through the viewport, the true devourers had grown large enough to block out entire star fields. Reality around them was beginning to fracture, revealing glimpses of the howling void they called home. Beginning consciousness link, Captain Vasquez reported. Sarah, you're going to feel a bit strange for a moment. Strange was an understatement. The world exploded into a symphony of awareness that stretched across galaxies. Suddenly, Sarah could feel the genetic memories of every predator species, the Vorthex's ancient hunger for conquest, the Zathari's blazing need to transform matter into energy, the Krellians' drive to survive in the most hostile environments possible, the Dexians' desire to exist between states of reality, but underneath it all, she could sense something else, a deeper memory, older than individual species identity. The memory of unity, of being part of something greater that had chosen to sacrifice its own power rather than consume everything it touched. Asterisk, we remember. The voice spoke directly into her consciousness. It was the combined voice of every predator species, but also something more. We remember why we chose fragmentation over hunger. Sarah felt her awareness expanding to encompass the entire station. She could sense every cub, every adult, every human staff member. But more than that, she could feel the connections between them, threads of care and protection that had been woven over 50 years of interspecies cooperation. Asterisk, this is what we were meant to become, she realized. Not predators or prey, but partners. The reunification process began with a sound like reality singing. The cubs began to glow with soft light that matched their species' energy signatures. The adults responded by channeling their own power into the growing pattern. Their predatory instincts transformed into protective ones, and at the center of it all, Sarah felt herself becoming something new, not human, not predator, but a bridge between consciousness and cosmos. The true devourers struck the edge of the galaxy just as the transformation reached critical mass. They came not as ships or entities, but as living voids that devoured space itself. Reality cracked and shattered in their wake, revealing the hungry darkness that existed before the first star was born. But as they reached toward the inner systems, they encountered something unexpected, a barrier of unified consciousness that stretched across entire star systems. Predator species and their human guardians, linked together in a network of protection that transformed their individual strengths into collective power. The true devourers paused, their cosmic hunger momentarily confused by what they were sensing: unity. Sarah projected across dimensional barriers, her consciousness now encompassing both the station and the galaxy beyond. Asterisk, not consumption, not domination. Partnership. Asterisk, for a moment that lasted eons. Two forms of cosmic consciousness regarded each other across the void. Hunger and unity. Consumption and protection. The ancient way and the new possibility. Then the true devourers spoke, their voice like the collapse of universes. Show us. #. Epilogue. New beginnings. 6 months after what historians would call the Unity Crisis, Kepler Station had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. The facility now existed simultaneously in normal space in the quantum dimensions that the reformed devourers called home, serving as an embassy between realities. Sarah Chen stood in the expanded nursery, watching a Vorthok adult play gently with her cub while a human caregiver monitored their interaction. The predator's natural instincts had been transformed through the reunification process, instead of seeing her offspring as competition. She now experienced the same protective urges that humans felt toward their young. It hadn't been an easy transition. Some predator adults still struggled with their transformed consciousness. Others had difficulty accepting that their most fundamental nature had been changed. But they were learning with human help to navigate their new reality. The latest reports from the outer systems are encouraging, Marcus said, joining Sarah. At the observation window, the true devourers have established communication protocols with 17 different species so far. They're actually teaching some of the more advanced civilizations how to manipulate quantum foam for faster-than-light travel. Sarah smiled. Who would have thought cosmic entities of pure hunger would make good teachers? Well, they're not entities of pure hunger anymore, are they? That was true. The true devourers had undergone their own transformation during the Unity Crisis. Exposed to the concept of consciousness without consumption, they had evolved beyond their original nature. Were now explorers rather than destroyers, seeking to understand the universe rather than devour it. Dr. Chen. A small voice interrupted her thoughts. Sarah looked down to see Zara, a young human girl who had been born on the station after the crisis. She was holding hands with a Vexian cub who was roughly her age, both of them part of the first generation. To grow up in the post-Unity galaxy. Yes, sweetheart. Whisper wants to know if you'll read us a story before nap time. Sarah glanced at the Vexian cub, whose shadow form was flickering with what she had learned to recognize as excitement. The ability to communicate telepathically with predator species was one of the unexpected gifts that some humans had developed after the consciousness link. Of course, what story would you like? The one about the scary monsters who learned to be friends. Sarah laughed. That's not a story, Zara. That's history. But as she led the children toward the reading area, Sarah reflected on how the line between stories and reality had blurred in the new galaxy. Humans were no longer the weak species that others had believed them to be. They weren't physically powerful like the Vorthok or capable of manipulating energy like the Zathri, but they possessed something that had proven more valuable than any weapon or technology: the ability to see potential instead of threat, to choose cooperation over conquest, to love without the need to possess or consume. Dr. Chenzara said. As they settled into the reading circle, why do the grown-up predators still come to humans for help with their cubs? Sarah considered the question carefully. Even after the Unity Crisis, even with their transformed consciousness, predator species still preferred human caregivers for their young. The Accords had been updated rather than dissolved, because Sarah said sometimes the most important job isn't about being strong or powerful. Sometimes it's about being kind. She opened the storybook, a new one, written by a collaborative team of human and predator authors, and began to read about brave explorers who discovered that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined. Outside the nursery windows, the stars shone with new light. The reformed Devourer vessels moved through space like gentle giants, their hulls now carrying scientific equipment and diplomatic delegations rather than weapons of cosmic destruction. The true Devourers had become the galaxy's guardians, protecting younger civilizations from the genuine threats that lurked in the void between realities. And at the heart of it all, on a station that existed between dimensions, human caregivers continued to raise the children of species that could tear apart planets with their bare hands. Because sometimes, the greatest power in the universe wasn't the ability to destroy, it was the ability to nurture. As Sarah read about star sailors and quantum explorers, she smiled at the thought that somewhere in the galaxy, other humans were telling similar stories to other mixed groups of children. The future was being written by species that had learned to see beyond their own nature, guided by beings who had discovered that strength came not from what you could take, but from what you chose to give. The galaxy had learned why humans were entrusted with predator cubs, not because humans were weak, but because they were strong enough to choose love over fear. Even when facing the most terrifying creatures in the known universe, and in that choice, everyone had found a way to become something better than they had ever been alone. The story continued, as all the best stories do, with the promise of new adventures and the hope that tomorrow would bring even greater wonders than today. After all, in a galaxy where cosmic entities of pure hunger could learn to be teachers, and where the most feared predators could become the most devoted parents, anything was possible, even happily ever after.